They told you value is a number. You learned it was a story. They told you wealth is earned. You noticed it was staged. You enter the auction hall in your mind. Velvet air, quiet faces. A painting rises under a blade of light, and people begin bidding on a myth they intend to inhabit. No one here wants pigment. They want proof. Proof that they belong to the circle that declares what belonging costs. You watch paddles lift like synchronized confession. The room does not trade objects. It trades aura. A rumor, priced. You were taught that markets discover truth. What if markets arrange belief? You were told scarcity is math. What if scarcity is choreography? The paradox hooks you by the throat. Price moves before value because stories move before people. Rarity is a narrative with an invoice. Prestige is a fever anointed by association. And the wealthy, the truly powerful, do not chase high price. They manufacture the mood that makes high price feel inevitable. They curate your sightline. They tame your sense of proportion. They soften your resistance with a velvet glove called consensus. And in that silence, the truth whispers. You see the banker near the back. He watches eyes, not the object. He's counting deference, tracking who looks away first, noting which shoulders gravitate toward which shoulders as if gravity itself is a brand. He is mapping hierarchy because money is a social weather system before it is a ledger. Watch long enough and you will feel it. Value obeys theater before it obeys math. The room's oxygen is not air. It is coordination. Who will nod and when? Here's the part no one dares to admit. The ladder of wealth is not climbed. It is lowered to those who already look like the story the ladder wants to tell. The threshold is not competence, it's costume. It's the cadence of a signature, the ease of a laugh that says, I have time. And time is the rao. Arrest currency because it is harvested from other people's labor. When you possess other people's hours, you can afford slowness. You can afford poise. You can afford to make waiting look like depth. But what if the theater extends past galleries and trading floors? What if your daily life is staged as carefully as that auction? Influencers hold products like chalices. Founders rehearse humility like its armor. Nations rename violence as policy. And you, hungry for certainty, take the program, sit in your seat, and applaud on cue. Because to stand up mid-performance is to become a disruption the ushers will quietly escort away. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Emotion oils the gears. Envy polishes the mirror. Fear of exile tightens the tie. The terror of seeming ignorant makes you nod at jargon until the jargon becomes law. This is the obedience of appearances. This is the governance of mood. And so the richest act like priests of a secular church where liturgy is branding, sacraments are partnerships, and forgiveness is extended through PR. The altar, a glowing rectangle in your hand. Now the revelation turns colder. Poverty is framed as absence of effort, of discipline, of luck. But the mechanism is presence, of gatekeeping, of narrative curation, of ritualized approvals dressed as best practices. The audience is told to compete for the spectacle's reflection while the script decides who will be lit by it. You call it meritocracy. They call it stagecraft. Strategy. Make price a mirror, not a metric. Embed status in the object so the object justifies the status. Seed a legend of origin. Artisan, exclusive, limited, and then flood the air with the echo. Do not force belief. Fertilize it. Let the crowd pay for the irrigation. Leverage arrives when dissent looks cheap and consensus looks expensive. When questioning the story threatens your social credit rating. When silence costs less than doubt. That's when narrative hardens into law, and the law mouths, this is natural, this is neutral, this is how things are. And in that silence, the truth whispers. You begin to understand. The economy of appearances is not decoration. It is infrastructure. The lighting of the room is a policy. The guest list is legislation. The small laugh near your ear is an instrument of credit. To move inside this world without being consumed by it, you must train your eye to separate the halo from the thing wearing it, to feel the difference between the crowd's heat and the object's warmth. To ask each time, who profits when I believe this? The awakening is not dramatic. It is surgical. You detach from the mood without declaring war on the room. You become unreadable to the mirror, and the mirror, hurt, confused, searches for another face to sanctify. Morning. Screens bloom like faithful flowers. You scroll not because you're weak, but because the world is now poured through a narrow gate that fits in your palm. The feed speaks in the intimate voice of a friend who knows your appetite. The machine has learned your patience, your boredom, your night terrors, your cravings. Between 1100 p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m., it does not care about your soul. It cares about your sequence. You ask gently, why am I stuck while others rise? The answer arrives softly, because the staircase you climb is an escalator going the other way. Consent today rarely feels like pressure. It feels like taste. It feels like a choice that was pre-suggested so smoothly you mistake it for originality. A venture fund launches a movement from a boardroom gasketed in glass, and within hours, ordinary people tattoo the slogan into their bios as if it were a memory they always had. The smartest leash is self-worn. Seduction is cheaper than suppression. The budget line for force is replaced by the infinite credit of your attention. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Platforms are not neutral plazas. They are jurisdictions with invisible zoning laws. Outrage is subsidized. Nuance is taxed. Virality is an algorithmic subsidy for content that destabilizes your nervous system just enough to keep you here, open, clicking, never so much that you log off. Meanwhile, analysts with tidy shirts tune dials labeled engagement, session length, retention. They are gardeners of compulsion, pruning your threshold season by season. You were told to be authentic. Authenticity became a template that multiplies alike. You were told to be brave. Bravery became an aesthetic that performs risk while your employment contract sits in the shadows, unchanged. But what if choice architecture shaped the appetite itself? But what if the Discover tab is a corridor with mirrors that curve your gaze toward the sponsor every time you think you're wandering? Now control is a feeling of being free while moving through a maze. The hand that guides you never touches you. It moves the furniture. It labels the doors. Psychology is the architect. Intermittent rewards, social proof, tribal triggers. Look, it whispers. Everyone you respect has already moved. You are a social creature. You fear exile more than hunger. You comply to avoid loneliness. You share to avoid obscurity. You align to avoid becoming a problem your group might solve by ejecting you. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Strategy at scale is simple, elegant, and devastating. Seed identities that can be purchased. Let people buy belonging the way they buy shoes. Stage a controversy. Then sell the reconciliation with a limited edition drop. Recruit creators to evangelize the idea that creation equals commerce. Ensure that dissent looks like poor marketing. Every road leads back to the store. And the store? It is embedded inside the ritual of your day. Leverage compounds when your profile is also your passport, when access to life, loans, travel, friendship, even safety, gets authenticated through a graph owned by a handful of firms that claim they're not responsible for how reality rearranges itself around their indexes. Policies harden into physics. If you argue with gravity, you break your ankle. If you argue with the feed, you lose your audience. So you fall in line and call it wisdom. But what if you stopped performing the script you didn't write? Application is quiet. You edit your inputs. You ration friction. You delete micro-habits that auction your mood to the highest bidder. You let boredom return as a teacher. You do not renounce the platforms. You demote them. You reclaim the right to unrespond, to unscan, to be unmoved. And in that silence, the truth whispers, your consent is now engineered, but so is your refusal. You become slow where speed is encouraged, present where distraction is free, skeptical where enthusiasm is marketed. The algorithm cannot monetize your ambiguity. It cannot predict your pauses. It learns you are less valuable, and that is your victory. Under fluorescence, the paper glows, 30 years condensed into a signature. You are told the rate, the term, the blessing of approval. You are made to feel chosen. Debt speaks in the language of belonging. We trust you. Debt moves in the rhythm of aspiration. You deserve this now. The revelation arrives like frost. Scarcity is not the absence of resources. Scarcity is the presence of gates. Warehouses overflow while price signals moan about shortage. Algorithms restrain supply to keep margins plump. Destroyed inventory keeps the aura intact. It's not that people don't have. It's that they are not allowed. Here's the part no one dares to admit. The poor are manufactured, not by conspiracies in smoky rooms, but by consistent incentives written into policy, banking, zoning, education. By fees structured like tiny traps on the floor of your month. By a payroll calendar that aligns mischief with rent day. By late penalties that punish the exact symptom they pretend to cure. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Psychology does the quiet labor of enforcement. Shame turns structural scarcity into personal failure. You come to see your constraints as character. You baptize austerity as virtue because that's what the chorus praises. Meanwhile, those selling debt make discipline your cosmetic. They call you responsible when you absorb risk they engineered. They place morality in the mouth of mathematics and make you apologize to the rate. But what if the calendar itself had teeth? Time is financed. Your future is collateral. The mercy of compounding works in two directions, and for most it compounds cruelty. The interest you pay is not just a percentage. It is your attention, your nights, your best hours spent kneeling at the altar of due soon. You become obedient to date stamps. Your imagination shrinks to the horizon of the next statement. Strategy is elegant. Keep liquidity abstract and consequences intimate. Wrap necessities in subscriptions so exit costs feel disloyal. Hide the lever in terms and conditions where exhaustion will sign on your behalf. Price risk aggressively, then socialize failure through euphemisms. Market correction. Downturn. Unforeseen macro conditions. And the cashier asks you for $35 because your balance hit zero for 7 minutes. Leverage blooms where alternatives are made to look obscene. A family rejecting a predatory loan is labeled naive. A worker refusing unpaid expectations is labeled ungrateful. A neighborhood resisting luxury. Zoning is labeled anti-progress. The labels are a currency of shame, and you are taught to avoid being paid in them at all costs. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Conflict cracks the ceiling when the math refuses to match the mouth, when productivity rises and security falls, as if by design. You realize the system runs lean when your life runs thin, that your efficiency feeds the story of their competence, that the bonus gets funded by your tightening the belt. Application does not look heroic. It looks like auditing who profits from your worry, unbundling needs from reputations, negotiating with systems, not clerks, with policies, not smiles. You learn to see a contract as a creature with a bite. You stop apologizing to percentages. You become fluent in exit. But what if the most radical act was to refuse urgency, to stop buying speed, to suffer the inconvenience of sovereignty? It is not glamorous. It is power. And in that silence, the truth whispers, you will still live under law, under rules, under scarcity that is sometimes real. But you will not live under the hallucination that the leash is a handshake. You will not confuse approval with freedom. You will not call the hunger noble. You will call it by its name and feed it on your own terms. A king who limps is harder to hate. A giant who whispers feels safe to stand beside. The apex predator learns to disguise itself as prey, because pity is a more durable shield than iron. You see it everywhere once the lens is fitted. A CEO in a cardigan calls a catastrophe growing pains. A politician winks at his own clumsiness, careful to look human, never careless enough to look weak. A fund brands itself as a family, and you are invited to the table while the acquisition contracts wait off stage like unsheathed knives. Humility becomes a uniform. Vulnerability becomes a product. Power plays small. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Dominance announces itself as contrition, because contrition lowers the guard. Underestimation is a fortress. When critics laugh too early, diligence melts. When rivals assume you're fumbling, they back off just enough for consolidation to complete in the shadows. The mask is not a lie. It is theater that rearranges attention. But what if the apology is a tactic? Strategy is choreography. Stage a loss to anchor expectations. Leak a failure to bait complacency. Time disclosures so that outrage cools before decision day. Meanwhile, silent armies in legal, regulatory and tax architecture thread needles through labyrinthine code. Subsidiaries proliferate like shadows around a lamp. Each looks harmless. Together they darken the room. Psychology lubricates the hinges. People forgive the contrite. They dismiss the unimpressive. They extend grace to the trying. And when the wolf wears a cardigan, the shepherds become critics of your suspicion, not guardians of the flock. You are told to be kind. You are told to understand. You are told the broom closet has nothing to hide. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Leverage hides in footnotes, in not material to investors, in customary covert. So in industry standard clauses, no one reads because boredom is a gate. The strongest room in the castle has no door. It has a sign that says, maintenance. You learn to listen for silence, to trace the negative space, to ask not only what is declared, but what survives the audit. But what if you trained your eye to separate sound from signal? Application is surgical. You map incentives, not claims. You make timelines your allies, not their cover. You assume that the simplest explanation is often camouflage. You postpone outrage until the paperwork speaks. You learn that transparent update often means we already decided. You do not fight every stage cue. You reserve energy for the moment the curtain hides the hand. Conflict is the price of such clarity. You will be called cynical. You will be told your standards are cruel. You will be asked to applaud effort while outcomes are diverted. You will feel lonely because the crowd prefers stories with redemption arcs and gentle villains. You will stand at the edge of the stage and refuse the candy offered by the penitent tyrant. And in that silence, the truth whispers. You become difficult to soothe, hard to distract, patient as a lion in tall grass. You do not hiss. You do not roar. You wait for the mask to ask for your trust, and you respond with due diligence. That is the coldest power of all, the refusal to be hurried into hope. Empires end with noise. Narratives end with a shrug. Logos change. Titles rotate. The machine hums exactly as before. That is the quiet coup, the transfer of legitimacy from men to myths, from offices to stories so sticky they feel like nature. You are told markets are like weather. Governments are like parents. Companies are like families. Efficiency is virtue. There is no alternative. Say something enough, and it becomes background radiation. People stop questioning. They begin to metabolize. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Here's the part no one dares to admit. Systems become immortal when they outsource their defense to culture. Fund the think tank, endow the chair, sponsor the graduation speech, inscribe the children's book. Rituals do the rest. Commencement robes, quarterly earnings calls, holiday sales, anthem nights. Each repetition sands down the edge of doubt until obedience feels like taste. But what if boredom is the real sovereign? Power does not fear enemies. It fears fatigue. If your skepticism is tired, the default wins. So the story optimizes for comfort. It gives you heroes to cheer and villains to boo, while the ledger remains untheatrical, untelegenic, untouched. It offers participation through merchandise. It sells you rebellion that roots back to the same processor. Strategy is intergenerational. The authors die, the scripture remains, the executive retires, the policy survives as best practice. The mayor resigns, the zoning stays. The coup is quiet, because it was never dramatic. It was administrative. Leverage becomes invisible once institutions teach the myth to those who will enforce it for a salary. Compliance trainings officiate the creed. HR scripts normalize the ritual. The rhythm of approvals wears fingerprints off the knife. And when the cut finally hurts, there is no one to blame but the atmosphere. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Conflict is the cost of waking. You will feel socially cold, professionally exiled. Without the shared slogans, conversation becomes friction. Without the agreed myths, invitations thin. You stand at the window and see the city's lights like constellations of policy and procurement, philanthropy and PR, each star named after a promise that now tastes metallic in your mouth. Evolution is not rebellion for spectacle. It is literacy. It is the apprenticeship in ambiguity that refuses simple villains and therefore refuses simple absolutions. You hold two truths at once. Systems are made by people, and then they outgrow them. People can be decent, while the systems they maintain are efficient at harm. This maturity does not soothe, it clarifies. Application is precise. You build counter-myths that do not promise paradise, but demand lucidity. You design assets that do not need flattery to survive. Skills, savings, alliances with people who prize reality more than comfort. You practice influence that does not announce itself, sponsorship without selfies, aid without applause, leverage without confession. But what if the end of obedience felt less like revolt and more like sleep leaving your eyes? You do not stand on a box and preach. You adjust your posture. You stop asking for permission from tales that were written to keep you polite. You write nothing on your banner. You carry a blank flag. The crowd cannot categorize you. That is the power, to be legible only to yourself. And in that silence, the truth whispers. Perhaps this is the awakening. Not the noise of triumph, but the stillness of alignment. Not control over others, but control over self. To see the world as a power system and choose how to move through it like water, taking the shape of the container without becoming the container's prisoner. To understand that narratives are tools, not gods. To use them if needed, to release them when done. You've walked the long corridor tonight, past the velvet rooms where price becomes prophecy, past the gardens where consent grows on engineered vines, past the ledgers that bill your future in hours you haven't lived yet. You saw the giants limp on purpose. You saw the stories that outlive their authors. If you've come this far, you already feel the pattern. Power is not loud, it is arranged. Control is not a shout, It is a rhythm. Freedom is not permission. It is posture. Stay with that feeling. Keep your edges. Keep your pauses. Learn to be unreadable to the mirror and unmoved by the crowd. Let silence become your sheath and awareness your blade. If this voice helps you hold that clarity, return. Not for content, but for consciousness. Not to belong, but to remain awake. Join the quiet circle that chooses lucidity over noise, design over drift, leverage over longing. Subscribe, not as a gesture to me, but as a vow to yourself. A small ritual of allegiance to the part of you that refuses the theater and demands the truth. We will keep thinking here, softly, precisely. Between the lines where influence hides and where your power begins,